Exploring the unknown, from conspiracies to mysteries, you are entering the conspiracy sector.
Well, welcome everyone to this very special program. I'm your host, Aubrey Batchelor. Sailing this amazing ship of knowledge with me is Chris Jacobs, and you are entering the conspiracy sector. Like always, we hope you've been well since the last episode, and we always have a good episode lined up and waiting for you, like today. And today's a pretty well-known topic, but it's quite mysterious. It's one that I don't think will ever be forgotten or stop talking about, like several of the more unknown, kind of forgotten mysteries that are in the back of dusty textbooks in the back of our minds. But today's episode revolves around that of the Bermuda Triangle. And there's been several quite historical and well-known disappearances in that area. But there's been a lot of lesser known ones and who knows type ones. There's ones that, the ocean's so depth, what is the, like, what, 8% of the ocean's been explored, if that? And then this is one section of the ocean. And there's multiple triangles throughout the world too. We've all heard of the Alaskan Triangle,
Yeah, and the Nevada one too. There's
Nevada Triangle.
one. Yeah, off to sea of Japan. Yeah.
There's multiple ones. There's one over there in the eastern United States too. I forget what it's called. Uh,
There's the one. Yeah, there's here the Bermuda Triangle, of course, that's much further south. Then there's one further north that I do not remember the name either. I know it's along the coast up further.
hmm
Uh,
we'll have to get a list of them all here before the end of the show.
mhm.
But
Uh,
the Bermuda Triangle, it's just quite depth, to all of its mysteries. I guess that's the intrigue behind it. And I'm gonna dive right on into it real quick. I just wanted to
I'll check that later on. But yeah, I was going to see if I could do it real quick. But yeah, this it's actually quite interesting. And later on in the show, I'll give an interesting story about me and Joanna's encounter with the Bermuda Triangle. So it's actually quite fascinating. So
I just wanted to dive off real quick and give everybody at the start of the episode a timeline of some of the disappearances. I'm just using Google's AI overview for it.
it's been
And
useful. DuckDuckGo is actually very, very useful as well. I noticed.
is it?
You get more detail from DuckDuckGo because Google likes to censor stuff. Just for
That's
thought people
true.
picking stuff up. So
I'll
yeah.
have to check that out. DuckDuckGo.
Hmm.
Uh, right here goes, according to Google AI overview, the Bermuda Triangle, a triangular region. Well, thank you for telling us it's a triangular region. In the Atlantic Ocean is known for numerous incidences of unexplained disappearances of ships and aircraft. Here's a timeline of some of the most notable incidences. Early disappearances in the 1800s, several ships like the USS Pickering, which lost in the area, potentially due to storms and other natural causes. In 1918, the USS Cyclops, a Navy cargo ship with 306 crew and passengers, disappeared without a trace, becoming one of the most infamous incidences. And I believe that particular incident is the biggest loss of life and casualties due to a non-war incident. I believe. In the 1940s, the USS Proteus and Nereus, sister ships of the Cyclops, also disappeared in the same area. In the mid-20th century, in 1945, probably the most famous disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle was that of Flight 19. Five U.S. Navy torpedo bombers vanished after a routine training flight, along with a rescue plane. In the 1940s and 50s, incidents like the disappearance of the Star Tiger and Star Ariel aircraft raised the profile of the Bermuda Triangle. Later disappearances in the 50s and 60s, several other ships and aircraft continued to disappear in the region, further solidifying its reputation. In the 60s and 70s, the Witchcraft, a cabin cruiser owned by Miami hotel owner Dan Burak, disappeared in 1967. As recent as 2015, two 14-year-old boys, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, went missing while on a fishing trip in their boat. So that's kind of their AI overview of the Bermuda Triangle. And I want to say one thing that was before that. Christopher Columbus, on his adventure over here, reported in his journal that he was tangled in the weeds. And there's a particular type of ocean life that grows there called garfassum, I think is what it's called.
Mhm.
And anyhow, it can like entangle ships and like there you are stuck. But what gar garfassum, I think is what it's called.
Sargassum,
Uh,
I believe is.
yeah, gargassum. It creates a noxious gas, so like it makes you hallucinate and like God knows what.
You cut it open
And
with it too.
there's some interesting stories about that, and see, it's so in depth. That's just one of the theories.
Yeah, I'd heard about that. That stuff's pretty noxious. I've actually smelled that stuff before. It's pretty gross, actually. But yeah, I've actually there's been sometimes with a lot of stories out there you don't know what to believe. My mother and I heard stories about the Bermuda Triangle for years. They oversaturated the media with it a lot of times, but usually the times they're trying to oversaturate the market with something, that's something you usually either have to completely ignore in cases of disinformation, like the three-letter agencies love to do that kind of crap. But sometimes they will oversaturate so people get tired of it, so people don't look into it as well. And so people get annoyed by it, basically. And what ends up happening is this is usually an area then you have to look at, you have to use your discernment. I came to find out that these triangle areas on the planet, the Bermuda Triangle being the largest, um, these are actually time fractures. These are actually like temporal anomalies where and also through the multiverse too, timelines where if something enters a zone, one of these zones, it pops out somewhere else or somewhere else.
And see, you're leading right into it. Like there's theories of wormholes and theories of missing time and the Bermuda Triangle, where the people that have flown through there on a regular basis, lose time, and what they in the time frame that they shouldn't have, or they pass through an area. There's been people that claim that they're above the airport and they're talking to a modern day flight control person. We're above the island, but there's no buildings, there's nothing.
Oh,
So
because
they're
they're looking for a
communicating.
different spot and time. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're kind of leading into that with these areas.
Yeah, this is I came to find out Skinwalker Ranch falls in this, Stardust Ranch falls in this. If you want to go into the land-based stuff, these areas that have these weird anomalies. Some people say vortexes, vertices, or portals. Yes, that's true of like Sedona. That's true of some other places with ley line intersections and such. This is a slightly different animal because this is a rip and a tear. This is basically like a bomb shattered within the dimensions and just shattered it and then recontained itself into a geometric shape, and or was contained. And there is also some military, scuttlebutt, they call it, or rumor out there that there's an island at the center of the Bermuda Triangle that was actually a fragment of Atlantis. And
Hmm.
this basically, they go back, if people go back to the mythology of both Lemuria and Atlantis, basically they were basically firing rockets at bombs at each other, these nuclear atomic based weapons at each other, and they believe this is what ripped holes in space-time is bombs. And this basically goes with like the explosion pattern of different explosives where these things are kind of laid out. And it's say if you had like something hit where the Bermuda Triangle was close to where Atlantis would be, if there was a big fracturing explosion, this is what some of the legends and some of the channelings out there say it was, where it was like a time fracture. This is, you go back to your Elder Scrolls lore where they call it the dragon break, the Tiber Septim dragon break. That's essentially what happened for Atlantis, is something similar.
Hmm.
And you're dealing with weapons that are not only temporally based, but they're dimensionally based and nuclear atomic based. And this is why dimensional races are always shutting off nuclear warheads and nuclear facilities because of this very reason. It was atomic based then. This is where I believe also people get the idea of not only transhumanism, but also for nuclear weapons. This is why I believe Einstein and Oppenheimer got the ideas from the ether, from about nuclear fusion, because the nuclear bomb, because they were getting it through what's called the butterfly effect, or if it's been talked about somewhere else, you pick up on it. Any idea you have, you're getting it from somewhere in reality or time, and or other universes, other realities. This is where I believe Einstein and them were getting this from. Tesla got his ideas for electricity in the same methodology, and he even admitted this.
Well, and then Stephen King in Encounters of the Third Kind used Flight 19 as a reference, I believe, in that movie. They're like in that.
Spielberg. It was Steven Spielberg.
Or Steven Spielberg, excuse me. Use that as a time reference in Flight 19 in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Flight 19.
Yeah, I find that very fascinating because I feel that was disclosure where those men ended up at a different point in the timeline.
And there's even a deeper conspiracy of Flight 19 that, the captain didn't know what he was doing. Then they say that he knew what he was doing. They led him astray. Then there's this theory that one of them actually made it back to Florida. And remember, it was way underdeveloped back then. They crash landed. And then they covered it up. The government covered it up. And then they live their lives somewheres, or
somewhere. If you've ever seen the movie The Final Countdown with Kirk Douglas, that says it pretty well, where they go through some time anomaly. They basically mix the Bermuda Triangle with the Philadelphia experiment in that, and where there's this anomaly, and they go back to World War II from the 1970s, and one of the guys stays behind and ends up inventing the very program by which the aircraft carrier that goes back in time is invented, by which then they can go back in time. So, which I found that's a fascinating movie that has to do with a lot of these deep projects. If people it was basically from the 70s. It was made, and called The Final Countdown. About the it was like the USS Nimitz, the aircraft carrier. It was about that, and they mixed Bermuda Triangle with the Philadelphia experiment to make that movie. But I thought it was very, very interesting. A lot of these time travel projects, we've spoken about this before, but people consider these like Earth anomalies. But like I said, this came from an earlier period that the technology was at a greater stance, like in the times of Atlantis. I said transhumanism too, because what they did is they had the ability to look into other time frames as well with their advanced tech. And they had mystics look back, and they had some scientists look back. They went even further back to the times of the explosion of Asgard, which would be now our asteroid belt. They were getting information from other time frames, just like when we look into ideas. Like I said, when we have ideas, where do the ideas actually come from? It is actually coming from our greater soul essence, and wherever our other expressions in time happen to be in tandem with us now. And if we're so completely invested in a subject, chances are there's a version of us there. So they say past lives, but it's all happening at once. So like parallel, or it's just all happening at once. There's time, obviously, but this is where the metaphysical people and New Agers get it wrong. It's not really, there is time, or there wouldn't be time travel, but we have it wrong as to how it operates. It's more like in Marvel, where it's like branch timelines and stuff like that. But I get too far off subject. I believe that these triangles are fractures. And what some paranormal investigators did one time, they tried an experiment, is they sent a text message into one of them. And they wanted to see if they'd get anything back, just for shits. They wanted to see what would happen. So they decided to aim it right into one of these anomalies. This was a land-based anomaly. This was at what people know as the Conjuring House, because what ends up happening is there is one of these anomalies, a smaller version on that property. It's not a vortex; it's a time fracture. It would look like a big ball of yarn if you saw elements of it. A bunch of triangles knotted together into this big knot. And what ended up happening was, I think it was like a week or two later, they ended up getting a response back, but it was of another person that they theorized it was another version of them from another timeline or universe sending the back. They weren't able to prove it, mind you, but they got a message back from there from somebody who claimed to be the same name and person as the one that sent it.
Reminds me of an episode of South Park that I watch where Cartman wants to freeze himself to wait for the Wii to come out.
Mm-hmm.
He can't wait the 3 weeks, and then he lives in the future and it sucks, and he uses a futuristic telephone to make a prank call in the past.
Yeah, and the guys in South Park, that was hilarious. The Times Child one, but
Yep.
that's hilarious as holy hell. A lot of these different shows, even South Park, Beavis and Butthead have pulled this off too, with more recent stuff where they do the whole multiverse, type of time travel thing, where Beavis and Butthead even time travel from the '90s to now, and so that's what the new batch. I haven't seen a whole lot of that, but they do this they even add this kind of disclosure stuff both in South Park and Beavis and Butthead. They pulled it off with both of them. SpongeBob, they've done it. Courage the Cowardly Dog, they've done it. All of them. A lot of these, they've done it in some fashion. If they're just about to declassify something, they'll do it too.
Commercials.
Commercials. They even have ETs on a Mountain Dew commercial, all like drinking Mountain Dew, like, oh, these are all your bros. These are what your bros look like out there, kind of thing. Cat litter commercials, progressive insurance commercials. They've even had the Bermuda Triangle, a few of them. They've had alien abductions in a lot of them, and the Sasquatch in a couple of them. But the whole point is this: I'll circle back around to the Bermuda Triangle, but this is actually very, very interesting. I've even had dreams about the Bermuda Triangle and people that have disappeared in it, and it turns out some of them were ghosts that I've encountered of people that got sucked in there and said that they died then in ancient times because they time traveled. I've run into that myself a few times, but I have to say, the most fascinating occurrence that I've had with the Bermuda Triangle is when Joanna and I went to the Bahamas. And also, if people remember that Edgar Cayce predicted Atlantis would be found off the island of Bimini with the Bimini Road, and also said elements of Atlantis were also were basically the Bermuda Triangle as a result of Atlantis as well. He said that in his prophecies. The most fascinating thing was when we were taking that corridor from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way to Nassau, Bermuda. There's this corridor that's a shipping lane that goes from the southern United States all the way to Nassau and Bermuda, essentially. What ended up happening was, of course, you never have a damn camera when you see this crap, but it's middle of the day. It's actually not quite the middle of the day. It's about maybe 11:30, something like that. And we're standing out on the side deck of the ship. We haven't gotten to the Bahamas yet because there was a few days stretch in there where you're in the middle of nowhere. It's actually kind of creepy because there's like you're in the middle of nowhere sea out there. You don't know what could happen, but because I'm seeing the normal cargo ships like Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club. You're seeing a few of them. You're seeing a bunch of like cargo vessels. All of them have those container ships. They're container ships. And a few of them were there were other cruise ships we saw. Like there was a Norwegian one that ghosted us most of the time from the port in South Carolina. But what happened was further out, I'd have to say a few miles out from the ship, from the cruise ship, was an old-time sailing ship. It looked to be roughly from the looks of the people wearing the uniforms on the ship. I saw these people wearing uniforms. It looked like somewhere around it was like 16 or 1700s, and it looked to be like a naval vessel. Because based on the uniforms, they had uniforms on. I could see the blue uniforms from further off. And what ended up taking place was I watched this for a minute, and Joanna and I were looking at this, and it dawned on us that this was not a ship that belonged in our century at all. This wasn't like reenactors or people playing the part or something like that. Because some people will do that. They'll go and build a sailing ship and do the same thing from that period, or play a pirate or do something like that. But what ended up happening was we saw this, and all of a sudden it began to fade. It was like the middle of the day, the sun's out, but it began to fade, and then it just kind of lost, like it just kind of did this like fade, like you'd see in an edit, And then all of a sudden, in its place was a normal, regular cargo ship, like a Costco cargo vessel. And we watched this change. I know we were supposed to see that. And what ended up happening was what the fractals that a time fracture has. It's like I said, it's like triangles that are like surrounding each other in a ball, but then they form a larger triangle. What this happened, it was like shards of glass, like you see in Doctor Strange with the mirror dimension, where all the shards of glass kind of thing are all over the place. And it was like one fractal passing in front of another. And one fractal was in a different time frame, and one was concurrent with our own timeline. So, or our own time frame. And they just kind of shit passed in the night, and one took the place of the other, like just basically like an overlay. And so we knew we had seen a ship that had been stuck in the Bermuda Triangle, but they probably just thought they were still on their mission. They were probably stuck in a loop, or we were seeing into that time frame for like a minute or two. And that's our encounter with the Bermuda Triangle, and the energy out there is weird. If I could give it a feeling, it's more of it's a staticky like feeling. If like when we saw that interchange with the two ships, like one overlay over the other, where you knew there was a timeline overlay, or there was a historical like wormhole overlay, a fracture. You could tell like one reality folding in the other. Like in Marvel, they showed these honeycomb formations, like overlaying into other realities and stuff like that, in portals and whatnot. That was in the Marvels movie, the big dumpster fire of a movie Marvel had last year. But that's the biggest dumpster fire they've had. One of the biggest dumpster fires they've had so far is the Marvels. But Marvel, just a hint, don't please. But with this, the physics were right. What they were showing that for the universal incursions, this weird honeycomb terror that was going on. But or they fall into geometric shaped forms like that, or like wormholes, like in Interstellar, where they said, oh, it's a 3D circle and it ends up being a sphere instead of like a whirlpool. That's essentially was pretty much correct, or basically 3D shapes like spheres, triangles, squares, cones, things of that nature. And like in The Simpsons, where you see him like he goes into that weird 3D reality Homer does, and there's all these bouncing around, and he throws one and it turns into a wormhole. That's kind of like along those lines. It's comedic, but that's along those lines. But I've seen implants in people that are photonic, holographic, that look like conical shapes and circles, triangles, squares, all this, and spheres, things of that nature, and blocking people's energy and such. But with this, the feeling was tingly, staticky, and plain weird. It was like creepy when that happened. It was like, how if there's like a fresh burst of like ozone in your house after you cleanse all the mold and stuff up, how it's refreshing? Add the refreshing feeling like off the ocean with that, if you included like a weird electrical staticky with this like foreboding like feeling like somebody just died. And that's what the Bermuda Triangle felt like. With both. Ozone, refreshing, with creepy. That's essentially what that felt like.
A mix of chaos.
Yeah, it's a mix of chaos, and essentially it is chaos. It's a time fracture, and that's chaos embodied right there. So it's chaos magic and chaos technology that did that, because it's a nuclear or atomic burst that created this. So that's why, like I said, these ETs and these dimensionals are constantly disarming our nuclear warheads and plants and such, because even their existence is cutting into other dimensional states and other dimensional layers. And from what I heard, galactic-wise, what I've been told is that it's actually against the law out in the galaxy out there. with the Galactic Federation, or even if you don't believe in any of that stuff, just know that it's damaging. Uh,
Hmm.
so it's damaging to dimensions. It's damaging to other layers, animals, elementals. I've even had beings show up to me that look like elementals and gnome types that look like they're wet, and they have this green wet around them, and it's the nuclear energy they've passed through, and they become weird and creepy and mutated, and like you'd
Hmm.
expect a nuclear mutant to do. And the thing of it is, it stretches into the multiverse. So what you have is infinite diversity and infinite combinations, because in the multiverse, every possibility is possible. So if you have nuclear fusion, this is why you have the stories of nuclear mutants and crap like that. Somebody grows two heads, or there's fish with like three eyes, like in The Simpsons or something like that. It's because you're dealing with an infinite number of possibilities, and nuclear mutations are essentially tapping into all of these dimensional spaces, making these mutations. If this makes sense, it turns our genome into something partial into other universes. Like there was the one best example I could possibly find is in Star Trek Lower Decks, the last two episodes of the series, where they get this anomaly that's like fractured into the multiverse. So anybody that gets hit with it starts to mutate into a version of themselves that occupies somewhere in the multiverse. Ships start to transform into other versions of the ships from the other multiverse of starships do. That is the kind of what I'm getting at. It's something along those lines, or it
Hmm.
partially mutates a genome to where somebody's like a mutant. That's what nuclear fusion would do, connecting to the multiverse. So anything they put in games like Fallout, any movies about nuclear mutants and stuff like that, they're making a haha out of it, or a fictionalized version out of that. But there is a truth to that, because it's basically all possibilities wrapped in at once. Everything everywhere all at once. If people saw that movie, but yeah, that's where I'm at with that, because I have to know a little bit about what it does, about some of the physics that I've been kind of relayed and channeled a bit, but not me not being a nuclear technician or a quantum physicist or or any form of scientist whatsoever. It took me a bit to quantify or codify that information, uh, but that's where I'm at. Do you have any other information, Aubrey?
Well, I was going to dive on into one other thing here. I was just looking, trying to find the name of this researcher guy, but I can't find it. But I'll dive on in. I'm going to share this over to Seven Theories Behind the Mysterious Bermuda Triangle from 30a.com.
Hmm.
Article by Shannon Serpett. And is it real? The Bermuda Triangle? Sailors and pilots can become uneasy at the idea of traveling through the Bermuda Triangle, and no one can blame them for their hesitancy. The Bermuda Triangle has become legendary for hundreds of ships and aircraft that have crashed there over the past couple of centuries. It is said that over 1,000 lives have been lost there. This area of water in the Atlantic Ocean between Bermuda, San Juan, and Miami has become a graveyard for many people and vessels, and the fascination with it has only grown with each ensuing decade. Here are some of the most popular theories regarding the mystery there. Methane gas. Here is the Bermuda Triangle if you're looking on screen. And this is one of my favorite theories. Some people believe that methane gas is responsible for bringing ships and planes to their watery graves in the triangle. It has been proven that sizable amounts of methane gas exist in some spots in the ocean floor. If the gas were released into water, some experts believe it could sink ships. Hold on. Bless myself.
Hmm.
It could sink ships and even cause planes to crash. It could potentially happen rapidly in just mere seconds, which wouldn't allow those on board time to radio for help or abandon ship. And that's a crazy thing. Imagine like a bubble, like bubbling up from the surface, trapping a ship and just sinking it right there.
Mhm. Oh, that's been known to happen. Yeah.
Okay. Crazy. And then wormholes, like we talked about a little bit. Water spouts, kind of like a tornado in the ocean, like it says here. A hole in the planet's electromagnetic forces. All right. Places like the Gobi Desert are well known to cause compasses to malfunction. And I want to get it to that because Bermuda, the island of Bermuda, is primarily made out of magnetite, which I'm going to come over here real quick.
It's
primarily made
everywhere.
out of magnetite, which will throw off compasses, which could indicate a lot of the early flight problems and ship problems. You know, they're going the wrong direction or something happens or whatever. So there's a little bit about magnetite, but that's what primarily makes up the island of Bermuda,
Oh yeah, if you get enough magnetite to
form
get
of iron oxide.
puke, yeah, it'll make you want to puke if you get too much of it around. Yeah. So
And so there's one, of course, human heirs. Those kind of go one in hand to each other. And then one is there's no mystery at all. You know, maybe it's just a natural thing and you're in the bad place at the wrong time when Mother Earth comes calling. Then, of course, Georgia Succulus, it's aliens, which there could be USOs living there,
oh, yeah.
unidentified submersible objects.
They've been sighted there too. Yeah, yeah.
And that kind of runs down that theory. Is there anything that brought to your mind in that you want to discuss?
Oh, the magnetite deposits. Now, I use magnetite in a lot of some of my orgone pieces. And magnetite is also a well-known healing stone, but if you get too much of it, you will go nuts and it will drive technology crazy. And what happens is it's sometimes coupled with hematite, sometimes it's coupled with pyrite, and it works well with some of our shungite devices and stuff like that to basically create more of like a mini jammer anomaly, and people know this is our tower busters. Some of the ETTs I converse with call them jammers, but like Valiant Thor, when he comes through and everything, he calls them jammers. But the interesting thing is, if people, I'll divert a little bit to where the Montauk project took place, Montauk Island at Camp Hero. Off the beach at Camp Hero, that entire beach is nothing but magnetite. And time travel, anything associated with time travel, anomalies, anything, you will find magnetite not far behind it. And also crystal deposits, like in Loch Ness, for instance, where the Loch Ness monster is spotted. There's big crystal cluster deposits. I found out that was a dragon, by the way. That's that comes in and out of dimensional spaces, but that is places known for portals. And there's crystals and there's magnetite deposits there too, as I believe. People can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I heard that's more of a rumor. I haven't substantiated that, but Camp Hero 100% has a magnetite beach, and also Bermuda. I've been to Bermuda. The energy there is damn weird, and it does feel familiar magnetite-wise. Lodestone is this way as well, as it's a magnetic stone, natural magnetic. Neodymium, if you get natural neodymium as well, but magnetite, I have magnetite sand sitting in the workshop here, bottles full of magnetite sand, or a bucket full of magnetite sand. If I'm around it too long, you do get dizzy from it. And it's just the sand. And it's the same type of sand that, again, you go to Camp Hero, it's on the beaches. There's a natural magnetite ore deposits off the beaches and the rocks and everything. So it seems wherever there's a time travel myth and legend that's brewing, magnetite isn't that far behind it. If you look in all these places, there is, I guarantee if you dig enough and look around, you're going to find some magnetite deposit. And it's not far behind, usually.
Well, I think, let me see, I'm going to be lazy here. What is the highest concentration of magnetite on Earth? Laird, well, this is inside of the crust, of course.
Of course, that's
I
part of
think the island of Bermuda is one of the top ones, anyhow. So
Yeah.
compasses are going to be thrown off there. Shit's not going to work right. And you're going to be lost and screwed up, probably.
Oh yeah, magnetite will screw up technology. If it's in sand form, it will, even though that's the most useful for orgone pieces, it is the least useful around technology. You will destroy your computer and phone with magnetite sand. And magnetite ore, I would there, if you go to there in Nebraska, if you go to Lincoln and you go to Morrill Hall, there is there's a case there that shows a giant chunk of magnetite ore. And if you get close to that, you can feel the pull from magnetite ore. and you can feel that same pull, and you can get a dizziness, disorientation. The only one that beats it as far as disorientation goes is uh, not malachite. There's another one. There's a few others in there. Malachite is not one of them. It is man, I'm having a brain fart now. But there are several other stones that are basically equal to that of magnetite as in power. But if you want time and dimensional anomaly coinciding, that's magnetite. I find that very interesting that you brought that up with Bermuda, because this is also something like, say, the ancient Atlanteans would have done with their tech. They would have looked for natural deposits of things to use with their equipment. They would have done things like this, so to build from, and they would have looked for natural concentrations. And those that run the Montauk project would have also looked for these. And magnetite is also useful in one other area, and that's psionic and psychic and remote viewing research, and bilocation, because it aids in the third eye doing its thing. Because in the brain, you have quartz, you have calcite, and you have magnetite in the pineal gland of the brain. Also, bees have magnetites in their magnetite particles in their thorax. So this is why, if you want to see any any form of the earth shifting or pole shifting or anything, follow three things: birds, bees, and whales. Whales will get beached because the Navy is running sound wave pulse technology. That's what's causing them to beach. Then you have birds that get thrown off because the pole's shifting in some areas, and then you have bees doing the same. These guys are basically living compasses. And since compasses are also magnetically based, they go stupid and they get pulled by multiple. Say if you had a time fracture that basically, think everything everywhere all at once. And like, say if you were trying to look for true north, and say if you had thousands of true norths running through the multiverse at once inside of a temporal anomaly or a time anomaly or any age of Earth where the pole shifted, what would that compass be doing? It would be going to every single one of those true norths at once. So, given they even found ancient ruins that if you match it up to what true north would have been, say 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, it matched what a true north would have been in those other time frames because of the pole shifting. So every 25,000 years or so, they call it a Kali Yuga, but according to the Mayan calendar, or Mayan records, but with this, think of like a true north that all exists in different places at once because you're near or inside of a temporal anomaly or a time fracture. That's why the compass jumps around, because it can't find true north because it's pointing to all of them. Or South Pole or whatever, because normally the compass points always at true north. It's always going to go for true north, but in what time frame or in what dimension or what timeline or universe is that true north sitting? And with infinite diversity and infinite combinations, it's pointing at every single one of them. And so at once, and that's why everything's spinning around and going stupid. And the magnetite is also mimicking true north as well, because it's a big magnet, and Bermuda is one giant magnet. So there you have that too. So I found that interesting when it's interesting, conversing with other beings that have perspectives like that, because you end up finding out, it really is pointing at true north. It's just all of them, everything, everywhere, all at once. So, but
it's just freaky, too. Then just think if you were on one of those planes where you go through a wormhole, or you're on a ship and oh shit, back in the day too, especially, my compasses are pointing north. Where do I go?
Some
what
of
do I
those are
do?
really an abduction of ones too. Like there are stories of ships where they go drifting, and all of a sudden there's no crew on board, and like ghost ships. Some of those are abductions by beings that are under the sea too. Essentially, you got the alien SpongeBob down there doing experiments and everything. You have stories of the Myrmidon and mer people and all that too. Aliens have bases under the water, and I found out in that corridor that I mentioned before from South Carolina Charleston to Nassau, there not only does it intersect the Bermuda Triangle, but there's military that know how to traverse the island that's at the center of the Bermuda Triangle, and there's aliens that have supposedly have a base underneath that corridor where they can abduct people on cruise ships and whatnot.
Hmm.
And when we were out, when we were hit that, there's some people that actually had missing time on that cruise ship we were on, and every single person on that cruise ship got a bloody nose. All of them.
What the hell?
Even the crew, all had bloody noses, and people all of a sudden wanted to vomit for no reason and stuff like that. But it passed, and everybody forgot that it happened. And so I remembered, Joanna remembered, her son remembered. Nobody else did. And so it's like we got a glimpse of something, some space in between that normally people don't see. Like with the Bermuda Triangle. So that's kind of what we had to report. We were on vacation, yet we learned something entirely, completely different. So, from that experience. But that was many years ago. That was back in, oh God, what year was that? I believe it was 2017, I want to say, or 16. It was 17, the beginning of 17. When we went on the cruise, and I didn't want to go. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. And my intuition was saying something doesn't smell right about this, but we went, and that's what happened. So sometimes,
Kind of crazy.
yeah,
You're
sometimes
one.
you have
At
to do
least you
it.
got to experience something there.
Yeah, yeah. Even though my intuition was saying it didn't smell right, something told me, okay, maybe we need to meet this head on and see what it is. And of course, it's that passage of Bermuda Triangle. If you see that map you were showing earlier, where the corner of it goes over to Bermuda, uh,
Hmm.
that corridor passes like right. It basically grazes the Bermuda Triangle's nutsack, pretty much. So where we hit it, we were literally touching the edge of it. So it's creepy. I will say it's creepy. It's fascinating, but it's creepy. And you could tell that it was ancient. You could tell that war came of it. You could just feel that forebodingness, and that is Atlantis. This is also where you get all the stories from like the creation of Terminator lore and everything. They're actually getting that from Atlantis memories and Atlantis. Like I said, all of memories frequency and vice versa. So people are getting it from past lives. People are getting it from ET existences and things of that nature, and through fractures like the Bermuda Triangle. It's passing into our time frame. Why do you think so many people are into that transhumanistic type of thing? It's because they're remembering a time where that was a thing. And so,
Hmm.
and those people got it from the time frame where it was a thing somewhere else. You see how it passes through history. It just keeps going uninterrupted. People that don't know their history are condemned to repeat, or forget their history, are condemned to repeat it,
Hmm.
galactically or earthly. So that's why we're big into the galactic historical stuff, because of the fact that we're trying to figure out via
It all leads to now.
huh?
It all leads to now.
Yeah, it all leads to now. What's going on currently is a regurgitation of stuff that happened, even in our regular human history, like regular history from the past. Like with the COVID debacle, what the government did is they were mimicking things from the Black Death time frame. If you look back there, they were mimicking different things that took place within that timeline, and they were regurgitating it here to play an op. Let's see. So they were looking back on history, hoping people, it's like, yeah, this is a rerun, but we're not going to tell them it's a rerun. We're going to advertise it like it's new. Uh, so, uh,
Yeah.
so that's essentially, if people look back into the Black Death history, that's what essentially happened. And the reason the merchants now, businesses lost out, because in the original history, merchants won. Merchants won out and gained real royal standing then with kings and queens and kingdoms then. So but they flipped it around now and made it so businesses lost. That's the only bit of history they didn't repeat because they didn't want people to repeat it. So, but that's a bit of history. I know it had nothing to do with the topic, but that was a bit of history that some people don't realize is what they were doing. But because they know history that some people don't look up. So, and they're counting on that because they've dumbed everybody down with chemicals and psionic garbage. So, but from that point, I don't know if you have anything left to add.
We'll go into one more little thing before questioning real quick. I want to go back to, uh, not that. Oh, well, never mind. I guess we did talk about it all. What
Zoom.
I couldn't find was that there's two people that are doing research down there, and I forget their names. I want to dive in and talk about them.
Okay.
They're two millionaires, of course, and they both have, or one's a millionaire, one's kind of, I don't know, elaborate adventurer. Anyhow, one has this amazing sonar technology where they're doing deep dives with unmanned equipment and finding these mysterious wrecks in the Bermuda Triangle. And I think COVID kind of done him in a little. And then there's another guy that kind of just free dives in areas that he thinks, in areas that you can free dive, and he's found a few. So there is ongoing research to discover, and that's where I kind of wanted to end with. There's continuation of, the ocean globally, but there is people that are invested uh, into finding these unknown disappearances and bringing a little bit of light to the subject.
Oh yeah, yeah. I thought that was actually quite interesting. Even sci-fi has gone into it. I noticed if people go into Star Trek Voyager, I can't remember the season, an episode called "The Fight," where Chakotay gets he starts to channel some aliens that live in this like Bermuda Triangle like section of space called chaotic space, and you communicate with him because the ship gets stuck in there. And they call it the fight because he does boxing in his spare time on the holodeck, And he gets injured and he thinks like he's gone crazy with a concussion or something. But his uncle before him ends up having what he called the crazy gene, and it ended up he was more telepathic and it just sounded crazy. And this part of his brain turns on, and these aliens live in this chaotic space, and they're basically channeling through him, like what I do with channeling. They're trying to tell the ship how to get out of there. And like I said, there's military in the center of the Bermuda Triangle at an island in the center where they know how to traverse it. It's like hyperspace in Babylon 5, where you have the techno mage group that's in it knows how to traverse hyperspace, and they have beacons and they can go off beacon, and they have really good sensors. They can find their ways to the portals and everything. This is the same with the military, and they showed a beautiful example of that in Star Trek Voyager. It's an episode called The Fight. Essentially, where he's fighting for his sanity, but at the same time he does channeling, and that's how they get out of the anomaly. But the beings live there; it's their home, it's normal, but they know how to traverse in and out, but humans don't. So it just looks like gobbledygook on their sensors. So and a bunch of mirrors and fractures, and that's essentially the Bermuda Triangle. It would drive compasses nuts. That's what Star Trek was trying to relay with that within their story narrative, but that's what they were trying to relay with that. And they've added channeling in there as well, because in Atlantis time frame, channeling is how some of the information from the time before came out, and they regurgitate it now, and people get channelings and the information through the ether via the same anomalies, via the same fractures. I'm not saying all of it takes place that way, but some of it takes place that way. And so I would never channel in a time fracture. You could not pay me enough to do that. So you couldn't pay me. You couldn't pay me. You could offer me $1 billion, and I wouldn't take it to do it in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle, because it would screw up my energy to the point where I'd probably have a stroke or a heart attack or something. No, it's everything everywhere all at once. That would be a brain scrambler. So a mind ripper. You don't want to do that. So channeling in the middle of Gettysburg, Salem, and Boston, Massachusetts, in the area of the Boston Massacre and Boston Cemetery, were bad enough. So I did that, and that was one of the dumbest things I ever did. So I paid for that for a while, like 6 to 8 months or more. So I had to have another friend bail me out of that mess. But with this, yeah, you could. So I will we'll get to the question and answer here in a second.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Ironically, it said timing, yes. I would assume it's Isaac, but if it's someone else, that's true. True. I open the circle to true benevolence with no conflicting agendas at this moment in time. Okay, Isaac? Yeah, it's you. Okay. The energies, speaking of scrambling, have been pretty ugly lately. So I know you sometimes people hear me say this, but there are times when I say it's ugly, and I'm having a hard time with it, and I push through it, then there's something to it. A lot of other channelers and people in this field are basically saying the same right now. There's also a lot of hyped up anxiety because of politics and everything, and thought forums add to it.
Always.
Yeah, people co-creating en masse. It's like that two or more walk in my name concept that causes some of it, but people stirring up junk. But there's a lot of activity right now. Isaac, yes, I'll shut up so you can come in. Okay. Mhm. Yes, this is Isaac. Yes, he is correct in his assessment about Lemuria and Atlantis. They warred quite heavily until eventually they began to shake hands. But by that time, it was a little late and a little, too much too late, or Johnny come lately by that point. And it left echoes and shreddings through time. Again, he made the Elder Scrolls reference with the Numidium and the Dragon Break. That's an actual event that was being shown where Tiber Septim activates the Numidium and scares the shit out of everybody. Making, and is not within the lore, meaning some things stayed the same, but it affected somewhere else in the multiverse. This is where your Marvel's going too, with your Doctor Doom being a copy of Tony Stark in that, where because of something that happens in time, it created the other variant by which it's the polar opposite, you see. But in this case, you had another character in there called Manny Marco, King of Worms, where he was human. Then he had a god counterpart. You had Tiber Septim, Talos. In this case, you had Atlantis destroyed, Atlantis intact. You had Lemuria destroyed, Lemuria intact. Think of those the opposite polarities in time. They still exist dimensionally and are untouched, but yet they were destroyed. You see, your Antarctica is a fragment of Atlantis. Further north, you have Greenland and Iceland that are fragments of Hyperborea, which is a piece of Atlantis. So, and your northern pole is a bit of Atlantis. So you see where some of those bits of continents drifted and were flash frozen. And essentially it was because some of the final battles at the end where they flash froze, some bits of the artificial intelligence that were at the end. This is why he had dreams of machine warriors walking on the bottoms of the Atlantic Ocean with flesh hanging off them. This is where they're getting those echoes and where the creator of Terminator got the idea. Whereas in Terminator Salvation, the guy that got turned into a Terminator on a molecular level, bones turned to metal. This was actually what had taken place. Again, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. You turned one thing molecularly into another thing, changing its vibratory frequency value from one atomic number to the other. You have a frequency here and a frequency here. You tell this frequency to go here, and it goes to the other one. You can tell cells to do the same, to transform or transmute into one thing or the other. This is the frequencies from the other time frame, sent a signal through that transmuted the very flesh and bone, but learned after it was learned. And they had their own homegrown version of it. But aside from what you all would consider to be mythological history, there are modern components to this. The Bermuda Triangle. Yes, he is correct about the island at the center and military that can traverse in and out. They're actually not as big of a pain in the ass nuisance as they used to be back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're working off a skeleton crew now. Are there aliens under the sea there? Yes, there are. But again, they're not as big of a pain in the ass. They're working on a skeleton crew. Are there Mer that complain about these things taking place that are also remnants of Atlantis? Like you see in the movie Aquaman. Absolutely correct. Do they look like that? Yes, they look like Vikings with scales. Yes, they do. With tridents, the whole bit, the whole Little Mermaid thing with the gay sparkles and the weird colorful beard and bioluminescent and all this other stuff. They look like they belong at a rave party with ecstasy. Yes, in some cases. And I'm probably going to get slapped for that one, but at some point. But do they look like this? Yes, they do. But the anomaly itself, the reason it is in the triangular shape is actually quite simple. The first number that you would ever hear of that is the first number of a full-fledged piece of geometry would be 3, a triangle. And it automatically reverts. Some people thought somebody tried to trap an anomaly there. This is not true. A fracture will then turn into the first stage of geometry, which is a 3 from a 1. 1 is sealed. There's nothing that's it's basically all sealed up and fine. Or a portal or a vortex that's working on a 1. Fracturing automatically bloats to a 3. And 3 then multiplies by factors of 3 until it expands to a place where it can't expand any further. Further from the central point of 1 to 3, and then 3s from that point. It's like an explosion. Think of a nuclear explosion, the mushroom cloud that comes from this. How far out, how many megatons does one of those explosions have? Then this determines how far the 3 goes out. From that explosion from the Bermuda Triangle, it went out. The edges of it were literally the blast wave or the intensity or the megatons involved in that atomic explosion originally. This is why they need to stop setting these bombs off, because it will eventually reach the megaton level of what Atlantis and Lemuria had to create the very fractures that are the Bermuda Triangle, Dragon's Triangle, Nevada Triangle, Alaska Triangle, and the rest of them. These are opposite energy points from one end to the other. They cut through the dimensions and they go to the opposite points. This is how the Earth grid then works. It reverberates, goes over here, it opens up another anomaly. Say a project such as your Montauk project or any other time travel project or those that work with dimensional portals. What happens inside of a base? Go above where they are working on things underground. You will see missing time anomalies. You will see people have weird experiences. You will see paranormal activity. They went to a place with forest people recently where there's a portal on site there. What happens when you leave there and go into a regular normal area? There's time delays and people consider this missing time, but it is actually because of a temporal anomaly. In this case, it's a stable temporal portal that has a mirror dimensional aspect to it that's stable. And it's an informational node, meaning of the Akashic records or benevolent Akashic records the forest people look at. In the case of the Bermuda Triangle, that was created from a gigantic multi-megaton blast that was seen from space. This thing lit up the skies and lit up, even it looked like it blasted almost out into infinity, into the black of space and into the firmament. The firmament is your Van Allen belt. And it absorbed some of that. And it filled in the spaces, and it even went high above the triangle, and even in your Skinwalker Ranch, it goes high into the skies above. And there's an anomaly there that's spheroid in nature that spaceships can come over and fuel their spaceships. Just like in your Doctor Who lore, where he goes back in time to Dickens' time frame. And the Christopher Eccleston version says to Rose that there were aliens passing through from another dimension that looked like ghosts or specters, like in your Elder Scrolls mythology or in your Star Wars Force Ghosts, looks very similar. Then later on, when he's the David Tennant version, he goes to that spot in Cardiff, England, and fuels his TARDIS. This is a true concept that is being shown. That's a very true concept that's being shown. UFOs will refuel on anomalies all the time. If they would just cut it out, they could heal these spots on the planet. They figure if they siphon all the crap out of these things, they'll just shrink. It is exactly the opposite of this. If you keep ripping a wound open on your arm, it will get infected. Or it will scar wrong, or if you have a broken bone and don't set it, it sets wrong, or it heals wrong. This thing was starting to heal wrong. If they would just leave it the holy hell alone, it would eventually seal itself in a few centuries. But we all know that's not going to happen. But it will seal anyway. It'll just take longer. Eventually, it will heal. But it takes a long time. And can it be force closed? Of course. But with a time fracture, you have to hit like a combination lock. Say if you were opening a combination lock, well, not just locking it, but opening it up. You have to hit the three numbers, go around, and then go around again and do this. That's how it is. What would be with each fracture point, and there's trillions of them. So allowing it to heal is the quickest way possible to fix this. I can go into questions if you like.
Yeah, so I know there's been a lot of mysterious disappearances in their ships and planes, but I want to dive on into the alien and UFO adventure for a little bit. Do you think A, it's possible that aliens and UFOs have had a part in some of these disappearances? And B, do you think that there's any race of aliens that could be inhabiting the Bermuda Triangle area?
Both actually are true, Aubrey. They are inhabiting that area, and some of those disappearances are like what he said he and Joanna and her son encountered on the cruise ship. There is an AT base under the sea, right off the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. There, they stay there because they can refuel their crap from there. Like I said, if they would leave it the hell alone. If you saw them. They some of them would look like grays, like some of the 3 foot tall ones. Those are their servants. There's flesh ones and there's robot familiars. There's some taller ones. There's a few. I don't want to say mer types. Of mer tend to not like that ancient alien base being there because of the fact that they have to share space with them. And that was their domain, you see. These would look like dome cities, just like they took technology from the Mer so they could be on the ocean floor, and they took parts of Atlantis and studied it and created bases on the ocean floor. These particular aliens have been there a very long time. The Mer have been even longer, since before Atlantis, even though they had to change themselves so they could live under the sea. They altered their own genetics and eugenics a bit. These particular aliens hijacked some technology that was down there, retrofitted it, and voila, you have some grays living at the bottom of the sea, like SpongeBob. So, and it's not cool like Bikini Bottoms. No, no, no. This is actually, if you went there, you would consider it quite boring, except for the window looking out into the ocean. It's actually kind of cool. These guys like to abduct people from cruise ships and from cargo vessels looking for different genetic markers. They like to blow dart people from the bottom with implants sticking through their feet. That also came through the times of Atlantis with the Matrixy type technology. This is what your Matrix movie was actually hinting on when they said they didn't know when society came to an end. They were hinting at with the Monica Bellucci character basically stating when she had vampires with her saying these were from another copy of the Matrix. They were hinting that time actually stopped around the times of Atlantis tens of thousands of years before, if you look more into the lore. So this is essentially what these particular ET and some of those Matrix type plugs would be foot spikes. These are under devices that are under some of your historic sites, graveyards, and churches and chapels. They're energy collection units by beings that probably should have died a very long time ago. And some of these things are empty. They're tombs. They look like undercrofts. But under the sea, these look like basically let's say 4 sets of boobies sitting on the bottoms of the ocean. So what this looks like, even the nipple included on the top, because they have an antenna sticking out that looks like a nipple and areola on the top. So they look like a grouping of mix of grapes and tits at the bottom of the ocean. So what this does, and I'm saying this because there are a bunch of boobs that live down there, and their heads basically are the scrotums. Let's just say this too. So with this, I hate it when I call them butt heads or scrotum heads or scrotumites, but whatever. Stop abducting people. This at the bottom of the ocean, if you went into these bases, there's also humans there too. If you went into these, it would be a mix of human military base on the inside, ancient alien ruin fragments from Atlantis that they retrofitted that had sunk down there, and other ET accoutrements, bits of ships that had crashed down there, things of that nature. They cannibalized, and basically it's the trailer park of military alien bases down there mixed with Mer technology, and they are furious about this. So there's not much they can do about it because they keep retrofitting it. It's like that Valerian, the City of a Thousand Planets, where they just kept retrofitting onto the same space station. It became a bunch of big maze of crap after a while. This is essentially what happened down there. So on the moon, same way. But with this though, that was retrofitted by Orions and reptilians would be soul trap nonsense from what was commissioned by Odin a long time ago to be a defense weapon for the system before pre-Ragnarok, but that's what we call history. In this case, you have a mix of things at the bottom of the sea, humans, aliens, and all in between when they drag other humans down there against their will, which it doesn't take much. You have cruise ships that go through there, but there's, as I said, it's being run on a skeleton crew now, or what he said was being, run on a skeleton crew, and there is probably a total, I'd have to say, humans and aliens at any given time down there, I'd probably say less than 300, maybe 350. If that's mainly humans now. And they're thinking of making that more of a public venue underneath the sea after a while through that for like cargo and whatnot. But at the same time, they will just say they just built it for those reasons. Don't you believe it when they say this? This is like what your Space Force says. We're going to build a moon base. You already got 3 of them up there or more. You have a Nazi one and 2 American one and a Chinese one up there. So, this with this they're going to make this public at some point in the not too distant future as well, because too many people and too many seers have looked into this. Whatever history they told you that it was built from, don't believe it. They'll just say there's some ruins down there from some other civilization. That's Atlantis. That's a piece of Atlantis. They'll eventually have to reveal that too in time.
Pretty interesting stuff. I guess just one more. A lot of the theories have been covered, and it's pretty mind-boggling, but this is kind of vast throughout. This is a vast question because throughout the world, there's all these triangles. But would you say that there's any others that can relate to the vastness of vanishings to the Bermuda Triangle? Is there any other prominent ones that can relate to the Bermuda Triangle that people need to be aware of?
Yes, the Nevada one has been known to make people vanish. The Alaska one most definitely has made people vanish. There's prominent politicians and not whatnot that have vanished there. There is also the Dragon's Triangle off the Sea of Japan. That is another big one that came from the Bermuda Triangle on the opposite end of the tether, where Lemuria was. If you look at the bottom part of Japan, there's a bridge that goes to nowhere, and there's a set of ruins under the ocean that are geometric shaped. That's Lemuria. You have Non-Madal in Micronesia. That is the naval port of Lemuria, Mu, I should say. But that triangle has had people disappear, and the Devil's Triangle as well has also made people disappear. There's land ones that some people have vanished into. Your Skinwalker Ranch was one of these. Your Stardust Ranch is one of these where ETs coming in and out of. Like I said, there's the ones in the ocean that are of the same variety that Stardust and Skinwalker have an abundance. There's even this crashed UFO that was there that time traveled itself and then embedded itself in the bedrock. So now it is part of the bedrock there. But the other disappearances are also one in your Tunguska, Russia, with your cauldrons that are there. Those were aerial defense weapons, land-to-air weapons that were built in the times of Atlantis as well. Those cauldrons fell into disrepair and then became radioactive. Again, they were nuclear-based, just like some of the weapons tech that was fired back and forth. There is a triangle in that spot for that reason, because one of those things busted open and became a temporal fracture and or anomaly. So that's a place where people disappear into the bogs and swamps, never to be seen again unless it's in some other timeline, fragmentary timeline, past a moment where there was nobody there, or in some cases, future timelines where somebody just happens to roll the dice, get lucky, and end up in a place where they can be rescued, even though it's thousands of years in the future. That has been known to happen.
Very interesting. I appreciate that. Thank you for popping through.
Yes, no more question?
No, that pretty much covers it up for what I needed today.
All right, thank you. These are always very, very interesting. Even though I brought up the Bermuda Triangle before, these were other details that I withheld, knowing eventually you guys would come across this again. And it probably won't be the last time because there'll be more information found out about these anomalies in the not too distant future as well. So, thank you both.
Thanks for popping through.
Yes, I know the Bermuda Triangle has probably been the story's been told to death, but there's just certain angles on it that have never actually been spoken about.
No.
Not at all. The reason I brought up Lemuria Atlantis, this was a theory that was going around only very lightly in some of the New Age and metaphysical communities and disclosure circles. But this makes sense. Like rockets and bombs would follow those patterns if they're firing them back and forth at each other. So like how craters would be for asteroids and things of that nature. And the Tunguska one in Russia with that explosion that happened there.
Yeah, that's a strange one.
Yes, and there's also the cauldrons. If you look up the cauldrons, there are these dome like cauldron-shaped devices that were actually like how we have surface-to-air missiles. That's essentially the Star Trek-y phaser photon torpedo-like equivalent of those. So from that time frame, and I believe the races that built it at the time were the ones that were on Atlantis. There were these Norse Scandinavian types, elfish-looking types, and a few others that were there that helped build those. Like Venusian colony variation and elven fairy-esque and then you have the Viking-esque Asgardian look as well. That's why Hitler believed the German people descended from Atlantis because North Scandinavian people, that's where some of their genes come from, is from there. And the Rh negative factor also comes from there. The Basque people, where they get that from, is part of Atlantis. They also have some galactic, I believe, some Pleiadian ties in there as well. But that's where some of the different alien races came from that were associated with Atlantis. Tower of Babel story that came from there too in the Bible, where the Tower of Babel suddenly I found out the story of King Nimrod, that whole thing. Now the term is synonymous with stupid. So what ended up happening was a war going on. People became overly arrogant, competent, opulent in their ability, we're communicating with the gods, we're mighty, and essentially that capability of understanding each other was knocked out, and that was a universal translator, and that was essentially the Tower of Babel story you hear about in the Bible. But it regurgitated from Atlantis, just like Noah's Ark did from Sumerian times, and Atlantis also the times of that from the flood, the Great Flood. So the Christianity kind of stole those two stories, so and put it and packed it in the Bible. But I don't know if you have anything further to add, Aubrey.
Nope, I think we covered it up pretty well. And if you didn't know any things about the Bermuda Triangle that we discussed today, we hope you learned something. And if you do know the topic, we hope you find it enjoyable. And it's just another mystery that we discuss, and hopefully sometime, I've been following it for a while, and I guess just the last little tidbit is I am excited to see if they find anything else in the future. All archaeological themed, mystery themed things that haven't been touched by human hands and vanished for thousands of years are interesting. But, when a certain area, and as big as of an area as the Bermuda Triangle is, takes on that mystique, I think it just makes that much more special because it's tough to find those. Such that objects, aircrafts, whatever it may be. But I guess until the next episode, you guys stay classy, and we'll see you then.
Yes, and you are now exiting the conspiracy sector. So thank you, everybody. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.